All right, guys. Welcome to episode 52 of Trek Live. First of all, before we get into it, let me know how the audio sounds, if you can even see us. We are streaming from my new quarters. That's why we didn't have a show last week. Crazy time right now, but I made some time to talk some Star Trek. So, with me as always. Bill, how you doing this morning, Bill?
Doing great. Glad to be here. It's been a couple weeks, like you said. You have a ton going on,
yes.
So I appreciate you carving out an hour and some change, maybe, to hop back on and get our Trek Live fix in for the week.
What are we talking about today?
We're going to be talking about Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock.
Awesome.
I think it's a classic Star Trek movie. It's in the front half in the TOS movies, but I feel like it's the movie that might kind of fall somewhere in the middle of, like, not necessarily, I don't think it's not talked about as much as like the motion picture and the Final Frontier as being like kind of controversial or on the negative side of things, and it's not quite as praised as often as 2, 4, and 6. So it kind of falls in that mushy middle, and I think it's going to be interesting to kind of dive into it and really think about how we feel about it, and figure out maybe where it sits in our overall scheme of Star Trek movies. Like, is it in that top half? Is it in that bottom half? Is it actually really in that middle? These are kind of questions that I'm hoping to hear what you have to say on, and I think I know the answer for myself, but I want to see what people think, and check out this underappreciated movie.
And that's kind of the reason why we wanted to do this topic, is because we haven't really given a lot of love to kind of the TOS movies. I know we kind of talked about the motion picture. I guess we're just kind of continuing our saga and talking about the TOS movies. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. Me too. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to diving into it. Rob is saying that he's watching the movie as we speak.
Yes, that's the way
which
to
is
go.
Really cool. Absolutely. So Rob, as you're watching, if you give us real-time commentary, if you're tell us what you're seeing, and how the scene you're watching is kind of standing out to you. I'm curious, and I'll share it with everybody who might be listening or watching this in an archived version. But where are you right now in the movie? If you're listening, let us know. And really cool. I'm glad you're doing that. But before we really dive into Star Trek 3, because we've been off for a couple of weeks, especially, I was on vacation. You were transferring living quarters. You have wedding preparations to make.
Yes.
And Rob has literally just started, so that's perfect. See how far into the movie he gets as we get into our discussion. But where are you in your rewatch? I have a feeling that you've made a lot of progress. The last time we did this, I think you were kind of wrapping up season 2.
Yes. So I, along with kind of moving and stuff, I have been watching a lot of Trek. I think
nice.
I'm gonna check just to see what episode number I'm on. But how's your rewatch going?
My rewatch is going well. I'm done season 2 of Enterprise. I finished that Sunday, the day after I got back from shore leave. I had like 4 episodes to go. Got back from vacation, knocked them out. I don't know that I'm going to be doing anything this weekend. I think I'm going to take the weekend kind of off and dive into season 3 next week. But it felt good to finish the season. It always kind of does. Right now on Twitter, I'm asking people to submit their top 5 episodes of season 2, and I've gotten quite a few of choices. Quite a few top 5 lists. Purpose of that is to kind of see, like, what the Twitter community's Trekkie Award nominations would be if we could like pull together everybody who kind of follows along and participates. What would the average kind of spit out as like the 5 nominations, and that's kind of a work in progress. I'm still getting submissions here and there. I'm going to cut it off at a certain point over probably the weekend and put out the results. And surprisingly, 21 of the 26 episodes so far have gotten at least 1 vote. So it's a widespread, sampling. It's not just 7 or 8 episodes getting cited all the time. There's all kinds of stuff out there. People have a wide array of opinions, which is really awesome. I love doing this. So I'll put that out, I'm sure, maybe on Sunday night, Monday, with the kind of final results. Once I kind of get a feel for the fact that maybe it's kind of wrapping up and everybody who's responded has responded. Everybody who will respond has responded. I'll cut it off then. But definitely enjoying seeing those results. And there will be Trekkie Awards coming for that season. There will be episode rankings coming for that season, all in the near future. So stay tuned. And then season 3 reviews probably next weekend. So, what about you?
Thursday night I watched The Offspring. So if you guys, folks at home, don't know, that's episode 16. So if you guys remember, I was like just finishing season 2 last time we talked, and now I'm 16 episodes deep. I definitely went hard in the paint in season 3, loving it. Some great episodes. Looking forward to talking about kind of season 2 and season 3 in a coming Trek Live episode, possibly. Yes. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we definitely have an idea for pretty soon that we're gonna look deep into season 3. I think that there is enough to talk about with the transition from season 1, season 2, into season 3 to kind of merit its own discussion. That's a big turning point for the show and for Trek as a whole. So we're not going to dive too deeply into episode kind of reviews and overall tones of like, what's different about season 3, because we're going to save that for later, which we're really looking forward to. So, but I'm glad to hear it. I think, is it a coincidence? Like, it can't be that you're not busy, because you're very busy. Do you think you're watching it faster than usual because it's really good?
I think that's the case, because it is really good. I think it was kind of the reason why I took season 1 and 2 so slowly was I wanted to give it a fair shake, and also it wasn't as strong as season 3, and now I'm just like getting lost in it. So
you're kind of old school binging it, like for real binging it. That's I know that you didn't start season 3 that long ago, and you're halfway through it, over halfway through it. So it's the results are speaking for themselves as far as like how quickly you're watching it and how much you're liking it. So really looking forward to that conversation in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that. So I guess we should just dive in. Star Trek 3. I guess my first question is always, what are your overall thoughts? Like, just broad level, wide angle, whatever you think.
Wide angle, to me, it feels, I love kind of the 3 episode kind of storyline. It feels like a 3-parter to me. And this was kind of like the middle, it's just the middle installment, I guess. And I liked it. I think, not going into too much detail, but I guess I'll go into it. My first thoughts is, I think that they're with Star Trek 2 being such a success, I think they're kind of just trying to suck as much out of that story as possible, and kind of lingered into this movie, Search for Spock. Obviously, it's kind of I don't know. How do I say this? It took a little bit to move on. Kind of the first half was kind of slow for me, but I kind of through the middle there, it kind of got really good. So
I think what you were getting at, real quick, and I agree with it, is that this is probably the only. I'm going to say this. I think it's the only Star Trek movie of the 13 that really kind of acts as a real sequel. Like, it actually picks up where the last movie left off and keeps story
building
elements moving. The Genesis device, and obviously what's going on with Spock. Like most of these other movies, they might have elements. They may kind of sort of like Star Trek 4 obviously has elements of picking up from 3. But the story of Star Trek 4 is very different than the story of Star Trek 3. And once they kind of get moving off Vulcan and they go off and do their thing, it really has nothing to do with 3. But 3 has a lot to do with 2. There's an integral link between those 2 movies. And most of the time in the Trek movies, they're really not. They're kind of little standalone stories that, like I said, there might be an element or two that, you know, lingers from the last movie into the next one. Particularly with like the Kelvin ones, you know, you have character elements with like Kirk dealing with his dad and things like that. There's things like that in all the movies, but this is the only, I think, proper real sequel to the last movie, which kind of makes it stand out. And you're right, it is a trilogy. You know, 2, 3, and 4 is kind of an accidental trilogy by all accounts. They didn't really intend, as they kind of went into this, you know, developing each of those 3 movies, for it to be a trilogy, but it ends up being that way because the stories are kind of linked. You know, 4 does pick up where 3 left off. Like I said, it's not like a direct sequel. The storyline of the movie, the plot of the movie doesn't really have anything to do with 3, but there are, you know, effects of 3 playing into 4. And then this one, like I said, is pretty much a direct sequel to 2, with a lot of its own elements. You know, there's a lot of stuff in 3 that wasn't in 2. It's definitely a very different movie, but from a plot standpoint and such. But yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. I think you said something that I definitely agree with. I think the first half of the movie is maybe not as strong as the second half. I think there's a definite like line in this movie that things start to really get hot and heavy. Like it picks up at a certain point and it really gets it kicks it up a notch. So, you know, I want to get more back to like more broad level thoughts from you in a minute, but since it sounds like we're on the same page there, where in the movie do you feel that it like kickstarts and it starts to get really good?
For me, it was when Kirk met with the Admiral in the bar, and he was like, "No, you can't go." And then you see Kirk give the smile, and I'm like, "He's gonna steal it." Yeah, here we go. So I think that was kind of the moment where it was kind of the turning point. I feel like it was kind of the beginning of the movie was kind of like a Star Trek II hangover. It was a really emotional time. A lot were happening. But I think for me, that's when I was like, oh yes, here we go. Not spoilers, Rob. If I'm sure you've seen it, but yeah. What about for you?
I agree. I think if I would have answered the question, I probably would have said something more generic, like stealing the Enterprise, like that sequence is like, okay, the movie's like moving now. But you're right, that scene is kind of a pivotal scene, and it's a really good scene. Shatner's really good in it. He like stares off into space as the Admiral's kind of lecturing him on why you can't do it, and you kind of know just by the look on his face that he's not listening. What he's really doing is thinking about how he's going to do it. He's completely tuned out, the Admiral, and knows exactly what's going to happen. So I think that is a really good moment, and it's really definitive for Kirk. And yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that's when you kind of sit up and take notice of the movie and go, okay, this is going somewhere. And I think you're right that the first maybe 25, 30 minutes of it is kind of shaking off too. You know, it's dealing with the emotional impact of what happened to Spock. Kirk's kind of in a daze,
Which I think they had to do.
Absolutely, yeah. That we need that. It's setting up the whole Klingon thing. You get a few scenes of Klingons trying to figure out Genesis and what they're going to do, and you're getting a feel for what's going on with McCoy. McCoy's dealing with the Contra in his head, and it's all setting it up. And I think this movie has such a kind of noticeable line, like we just talked about, where the movie like really kicks into gear, that you just notice it more. That you know, there's a kind of a definitive difference between like the beginning portion of it, like that first act, and when, you know, Act 2 starts, I guess. You know, the second and third acts are really kind of kicked up a notch. So I don't know if that's, I don't know even what to even call that. Like, is it a fault of the movie for having such a noticeable line, or is it a good thing that the movie gets really good at a certain point? Like, it really does like kick into like a really high gear at a given time.
I think it's a good thing, because you get that that contrast where at the beginning of the movie it is really slow, and then the second half of the movie feels faster because it is kind of paired with a slower paced beginning of the film.
No, I think it's a good point. I think you're right. Um, Rob is saying that he just got to the part in the movie. Again, he's watching it as we're kind of talking about it, where the Enterprise is docking at the starbase.
Yeah.
And that is a really cool moment, but I think that's a neat little transition to something else I kind of wanted to talk about. And I think this might be the movie that has the most like starship porn in it. Like
yes.
there are a lot of beauty shots. There's a lot of stuff in this movie. And I think one of the things that this movie doesn't necessarily get enough credit for is I think it really defines like the look of Trek. Up until this movie, the only things you had ever really seen were the Enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
the Reliant in 2,
Right.
you know, a couple things in Star Trek 1, little things, but you know, in this movie, it introduces the Excelsior and Space Dock and the Grissom, like those starship classes, and the Klingon bird of prey,
Yep.
that little freighter that you see a million times into TNG that Krug's like girlfriend's on.
Yeah.
Like that thing is used a million times in TNG and Deep Space Nine. Like this movie got so much bang for the buck and things that they built and designed that just reverberated all the way through Trek and became like such a part of like the visual language of the whole thing. I think 3 deserves a lot of credit for that. So I mean, would you agree with that? Do you think this is the most starship pornographic?
I totally agree, and that's one of the things I loved about this movie. It's just the effects and how much starship gets the spotlight, and I love practical effects. So it was definitely nice to see that.
Yeah, and you get a lot of it here.
Yeah.
Things like that space docking sequence is really cool. It still holds up really well. It's cool. Like they take their time with it. It's not quite as gratuitous and long as like anything in the motion picture necessarily, but it's not like a quick, you know, one shot they're in and they're out. Like they take their time and show you like what this is. You know, they get in, they take a look at the Excelsior and they kind of linger on that for a second, let you take it in and, you know, really admire the ship and get to know the ship. It's really cool. They do say the Excelsior has transwarp drive. Rob, that's a confusing thing for a lot of people. It's
that was a tough moment for me. I was like, do they have that? Do they?
Yeah, there's a lot of theories, a lot of fan theories on how to retcon that. And, people always kind of say that they think that the warp scale from like Enterprise into TOS is a different scale than like TNG, the 24th century is using. And I think the most popular fan theory that I've heard is that they were experimenting with a refined warp engine with the Excelsior that was going to be the new, you know, warp scale. They were using the new warp scale or something. And that's just the little tweak in your head when you watch it. And it's not transwarp as in Voyager and the Borg using transwarp to be all over the place at one time. That's what I did, at least. It's clearly not that.
I will.
Right.
I will say about the Excelsior, I love that they used an X on that. The experimental registry number and that kind of. I mean, although it's later on, the Enterprise uses that.
Took that.
So that's cool. So I'd love to see the. I don't know if that was the origin of that, but
it was.
Yeah,
and that's part of what I mean with like just introducing new stuff. Like this movie introduces so much into the language of, you know, what Trek is. That's one of the things. You know, NX means experimental, first of its class, kind of thing, and that came from Star Trek 3 with the Excelsior. So, let me ask you this, just kind of along those lines. What do you think is the best ship or space dock, like something like that? What's the best thing, your favorite thing that this movie introduces? Is it the bird of prey? Is it the Grissom? Is it the Excelsior space dock?
I feel like it was. I think it is like the NX registry number. I think that was just kind of a cool moment to kind of link it. Second, freaking Captain Kirk's leather jacket.
Yes.
Man, he looks good in that. Same with all the cast. They look good in civilian clothes. I thought that was one of the moments, one of the things that stood out to me also. That was kind of cool. That was a random thought.
No, that's a really good thought. That's really cool. You don't really see that in the other like all through TOS. You don't see them in like with her hair down and civilian clothes and
Mhm.
kind of just hanging out. And in the first two movies, you really don't either. Maybe a little bit in two at the beginning of the movie, you kind of see Kirk and McCoy in more casual attire when they're in Kirk's apartment,
Yeah.
but not much. And this movie, they're kind of in it the whole time. They're not in Starfleet uniform. They're not on duty. So I kind of agree with you. And that leather jacket is really cool.
Yeah, I think all of the cast, it fit, all their
Yeah.
outfit fit them. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point.
yeah.
Um, really good. Do you think that this movie makes decent use of the ensemble, like the TOS cast? Like, do you think it's well balanced? Do you think, because a lot of these movies, a lot of the TOS movies are very obviously focused on your big three,
Yeah.
and then maybe a little bit of Scotty next in line, and then everybody else is kind of on the same level, same playing field. Like, when you think of this movie, do you think of anything involving any of the other characters, or is it mostly Kirk?
I think when I think of it, and I just watched it last night, I think of it as more of like a Kirk heavy episode to me.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that just the way that the story was, and we can kind of talk about kind of the plot and stuff a little bit later, but I think that it was just the way that the plot was, it was meant for him.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So and with Leonard Nimoy directing, I've like heard actors talk about how they would rather have less acting in the episode and actually because they're kind of behind the camera and doing that director role. So I think that's
Okay.
kind of contributing to Kirk being this kind of the center of the
Front and center
episode, I guess, the movie. So
yeah,
but I do think they do. They give a lot of kind of screen time to the other cast too, to let them have their moments. So
yeah,
yeah,
I agree with you. It's definitely Shatner's movie
Yeah.
through and through. He's front and center. The whole story kind of pivots on him. It's completely driven by Kirk.
Yeah.
With McCoy kind of along for the ride and having a lot to do too. But there's little moments. I think each of the cast kind of get something cool to do. Uhura gets her in the transporter room, telling wet behind the ears. Yeah, yeah. Mr. Adventure, like that's a cool Uhura moment that you don't get to see often enough, where she's kind of in control and badass.
Yeah.
And, taking command of situation.
Yeah.
Taking no prisoners.
Yeah.
Sulus, don't call me tiny. Yeah. That's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Scotty's
dismantling
hating. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great moment.
Really good. So there's enough there, I think, that kind of gives the supporting players like at least a little moment to shine.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of something for Chekhov, and I'm not sure Chekhov really gets anything here like that. But largely they do, and I do kind of appreciate that, given that the story is so driven by Kirk. And I think it needed to be, and I think Shatner killed it. And I'm gonna ask you a question about that I also asked on Twitter earlier in the week. In a bit, I don't want to do that quite yet, but I mean, do you have anything that what do you have? Any questions or any?
I don't have any questions. I just have any thoughts. And this I kind of talked about it before. I like that they went like really simple with the kind of the plot and the story of this movie. And if you can disagree with me, but I think especially coming off the hype of 2, I think they did a good job of kind of settling down. Like they didn't try to do too much with it. I think they did the right amount of just storyline and keeping it simple and stuff. So that's what I really liked and I noticed when I was watching it. Because I've seen it before where sequels they try to do too much and it kind of doesn't work for me. So I'm glad. And I'm not a big guy on sequels. I like kind of one movies and then just unless they're gonna make a trilogy and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's what I really enjoyed this simple story. It kind of almost felt like an episode to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is really really simple. I mean, the story is gotta save Spock. Like it's a really simple A to B thing it's got to do. Like the movie has to accomplish one thing.
Yeah.
And you kind of know that from the outset. Like, you know, it's telegraphed like right from the beginning. You know exactly what this movie's about. And it's going to do one thing. And it sticks to it. And it doesn't get too complicated. It doesn't try to do too much. I think. I agree. I think the simplicity of this movie really does kind of separate it from a lot of the other Trek movies too. I think it's refreshingly, you know, single-minded in what it's trying to accomplish.
Yep.
Ross is asking a question that I think is actually pretty valid and a really good question to ask. Did we miss Leonard Nimoy as Spock in the movie? Because he obviously barely appears. You know, removing Spock from the ensemble and removing Spock from like the Kirk Spock McCoy dynamic. Like, do you think that hurts the movie in any way? Do you think it helps the movie that he's not there?
I don't think it hurts the movie. I think that it gives a chance for kind of the other characters to kind of get their dance on, so to speak. So I don't think I miss him as a character. What do you think?
I don't really. It doesn't really bother me. While he's not in it, like physically, the movie's very much about him. His presence is always there. Like everything they're doing is for him. Yeah. And the whole movie's kind of about loyalty, friendship, stopping at nothing to save your friend. It's very much about Spock and about who Spock is and what Spock means to these people. Yeah. What they're willing to do to give him every chance. Like, what always amazes me about this movie, you know, when you really think about it, like Kirk does all of this for a chance to save Spock. Like, he doesn't know that it's going to work. He has no idea. He doesn't really believe in Vulcan mysticism as they talk about. Like, he doesn't even really understand it. He doesn't understand like what it means and if it's actually possible. He puts it all on the line for a chance to save his friend, not for a guarantee. Yeah. And I think that says a lot about Kirk. It says a lot about who Spock was to Kirk. And it says a lot about the rest of the crew because they're willing to go along for the ride. They buy in because Kirk wants to do it. Because they know what Spock means to Kirk and what Spock means to that family of people. So I love that touch. I think that's something that maybe doesn't get enough play. That, you know, it's all for a chance. It's not a guarantee. It's one thing to throw it on the line to do something that you know is going to get it done. You know, you know what the outcome's going to be as long as you do it. But it's a completely other thing to throw your career away and risk your life and risk the lives of other people to for a shot in the dark. You know, it's pretty big, and I think really makes this movie work.
I think similarly, like he's mirroring what Spock did in 2 and 3.
Yes.
He's kind of like, they tell him like, Kirk, if you do this, you're never gonna sit in the captain's chair again. He's like, no response. Just keep going. Like it's an awesome moment. So
I love that moment. I totally agree. I think that's one of the, if we're talking about like best little moments in the movie, it's the Excelsior captain saying that to him. If you do this, you're never gonna sit in the captain's chair again. He sits in the captain's chair and says, "Warp speed, gone." And there's almost like an FU quality to the Enterprise coming to warp in that scene. Like there's just something about like the sound effect and the way it's shot. Like it's literally like FU, I'm gone. Yeah. And that's it. So I love that. That's a huge like fist pump. Like this is awesome moment in that movie. And there's a lot of that in this, I think. There's a lot of those little moments, especially involving Kirk. I think the moment you were talking about at the beginning, where he's sitting zoning out the Admiral and you can see like putting the pieces in his head of how he's going to do it. That's an awesome moment. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand on the Spock question. I guess I'll go right into this now since we're kind of in that realm. I don't know how I feel about this personally, but I've seen people say, people who are big fans of this movie, it's not uncommon to hear people say that they think this is Shatner's best performance as Kirk, largely because the movie is so hinging on him, and because he's doing it without Nimoy. Like he doesn't get the play off of Nimoy yet. It's not the Kirk Spock dynamic like it usually is. You know, it's not the yin and yang that typically drives these stories. It's just Kirk. what do you think about that? Like, I know you have.
I don't know. That's a
Yeah,
tough question because I think he's great in Six too.
he is great in Six.
I think in this movie he's asked to do a lot as an actor. He's asked to deal with
Mhm.
death multiple times.
Yep.
He's asked to be this kind of actiony hero rah rah guy.
Yep.
And yeah, he's asked of a lot, and I think um, I don't. That's tough to say. I can't give a definitive answer, but I think that he definitely stretches his legs, and you see kind of his ability as an actor um, in this movie.
Yeah, I think I always typically say I kind of change based on what I've more recently watched, but I usually say my favorite thing Shatner ever did was either two or The City on the Edge of Forever. Like if I'm picking one Shatner performance as Kirk, I usually go to one of those two.
Yeah.
But this is a tough one not to pick for me.
Yeah.
Because like you said, he's asked to do so much. He drives the movie completely.
Yeah.
It's not one note in any way. Like he's not just heroic. He's not just romantic. He's not just any one thing. He's everything. I think about scenes like sitting in the captain's chair and saying warp speed. Like that moment is little. It's not. He's not doing a whole lot, but it's heroic and it tells you everything you need to know about what he's doing. I think of one thing that always comes to mind, and Rob just watched the scene. He said he watched. He just got to the point where Sarek is getting angry at Kirk. Like Sarek comes to see Kirk, and I think of the moment after Sarek mind melds with Kirk, and Sarek is kind of reliving or living the moment where Spock died. Yeah. And at the end of the mind meld, you see Kirk's face and Shatner's face. Like I always look at it like he literally just relived that again. Like you can see on his face that it's not. He wasn't just remembering it. He was in that moment again. Yeah. He's like broken again. The way the camera kind of lingers on his face.
I love how that whole scene was shot too.
Yes, with an extreme close-ups of the mouth,
eyes. Yes.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, but so cool. Yeah. And that's part of another question I have coming up here about Nimoy's direction and some of the choices he made. But that's definitely one of the things that stands out about the direction. But it's definitely a scene that really stands out for Kirk and Shatner's performance and makes me play with the idea that it might be his best performance. And everybody always talks about the scene when David dies and he misses the captain's chair and falls on the ground and gets up and turns around after it's done. Like he's got that. That's like a big like theatrical moment where he really gets to chew on like big dramatic stuff. Yeah. So he's got that, but he's also got the more subtle stuff like the mind meld
and
and the little FU, like I said, with the warp speed and leaving space dock and so I don't know what the answer is. I think I'll stick to my standard answer and say I think 2 is probably my favorite Shatner performance. When I watch 2, I'm always blown away. I'm like, anybody who says he's not good is out off the rocker. Like, he's hammy sometimes. He ever does it sometimes, but
that's Shatner though.
That's Shatner. It's just part of who he is. It's part of the character. Like,
acting,
and it's Kirk. Like, it's fine for like it doesn't even matter. Like, Kirk is a ham sometimes. Like, he's over the top sometimes. Yeah. It's part of the character. It doesn't bother me at all, and it makes Kirk who he is. Like, it makes him a distinctive, unique character, and it makes it fun and kind of exuberant, and it makes, especially the original series, what the original series is. Yeah. So I'm glad it is what it is, and he's awesome. Whenever he gets like real dramatic things to do, he usually kills it. And these couple movies, 2, 3, even 4, he's like charming and funny and heroic in 4 too. He's not doing the dramatic big stuff that he's doing in some of these other movies. And like you said, 6, he's awesome in that too. So he's great, and I'll say that for it. Yeah. What do you think of the use of the Klingons in this? Like, what do you think? Where does Christopher Lloyd, like sit in the overall pantheon of like Star Trek adversaries in the movies? Like, is he in the upper half? Is he not real good? Like, what do you think of him and the Klingons and all that stuff in the movie?
I think it's just like an attribute or dynamic to kind of raise the stakes. That's what I think. I think
he's a cog in the machine. That's it.
Yeah, he is. I think it's not like a huge, plot moment. This defines the movie. I think just that aspect of the movie kind of is used to kind of like I've said it before. I just add more drama to it. Just kind of raise
Sure.
the stakes, not just to go as a taxi service, steal a taxi to go get Spock. It's something else. So, what do you think?
Yeah, and I agree. Like in contrast to two, like the Wrath of Khan is kind of like a movie split in half. Like half that movie is about Kirk and what he's going through, and half of that movie is about Khan. Like the Wrath of Khan almost presents Khan at points like not even really as the adversary. Like in the moments that you're with Khan is almost presented as like the lead of his own movie. Like he's the hero on that ship of those people. Like it's a very different thing than what Krug is here. Krug is definitely like you said, he's there to put up resistance and be a cog in the machine. He's I think he's good. I think he's a good character. I think he's challenging. He does a lot of badass stuff. He does bad things. He's a convincingly difficult adversary. He's not a pushover. But that's kind of what he is, and that's kind of undeniably what he's there to do. Not a whole lot of time is spent really developing him like they did with Khan. But most of the Star Trek adversaries that you get later on, I think, are more in the vein of Krug and not like Khan. I think they played with trying to do Khan a couple times, and that usually kind of blows up in their faces. So, I think Christopher Lloyd's good. Do you think he's good in it? Like,
I think he's great in it.
I agree. I think he's really good, and I think some people struggle with that performance because they just hear Christopher Lloyd's voice and they think of like Back to the Future or Taxi, the TV show he was on. People have a hard time getting over that, but I typically don't. I think I think he's really good. So and Rob citing some really cool moments in the movie. I guess he's hitting as he goes. The word is no, therefore I am going anyway. That's what we're talking about. That's some good stuff right there. As far as Kelly imitating Spock in the bar is a great little scene. I love that.
The eyebrow raise.
And it's just the way he talks. Like he's definitely got Spock in him, and how can you be deaf with ears like that? That's a cool thing. And that alien is really cool. I love that alien. The kind of weird way he talks. Planet Forbidden. I love all that stuff. I know a lot of people say that sequence is like some people think it's like maybe a little bit too obvious of a attempt to do like the Star Wars Cantina, like the bizarre aliens and the weird music and all the stuff that you get in that scene. And maybe it is, but I don't know. I always think it's cool when you see that kind of stuff in Star Trek, though, like the things that are not just on the ship or not just in Starfleet headquarters, off the grid a little bit.
Color to the beige
universe
walls.
Absolutely agreed. 100% agree. He tries to neck pinch him, right, Rob? Like knock him out. It doesn't work. The security guy. Really good stuff. DeForest Kelley, I think, is really good in this movie. Don't you? Like he's got some of his best stuff in this. He gets to. I think he's the one that might benefit the most from Nimoy not being there. Like he gets, some more scenes. He gets more different kinds of things to play. He's not just doing the kind of typical McCoy stuff. He's more diverse in what he's playing. He's got issues to work out. I think the scene in Spock's quarters when Kirk finds him at the beginning of the movie, he's really like,
that was kind of scary. I was like, oh man,
scary. The way it's shot, it's so dark, and the way the camera moves, and as far as Kelly's really playing it up, that he's losing it a little bit. I think one of the things this movie might not do is I think it's some of DeForest Kelley's best acting that you get in his time as McCoy.
I love the moment with McCoy, and he's like asking Spock what to do. It's like like I almost miss you, and that scene at the end when they get him when Spock's on the prey, right? Like I don't think I could stand Lucia again. There's some really good stuff there. Also, it's like another moment that I liked was like, green-blooded bastard getting back for me all those arguments he lost. And I was
I know.
like, yes, that was so like,
It's so good.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yep. It's so good.
yeah, yes,
Yeah, the character interplay, the writing, the actors are so comfortable in their roles, especially those two, Kirk and or Shatner and DeForest Kelly.
yeah,
Kirk holding up the sign saying, "How many fingers am I holding up?"
yeah.
Like it's just got enough little like, yeah, little laughs. You know, it's not a comedy by any means. This is a really heavy, dark movie. Not a lot of good stuff happens in this movie. Complete, and that's why they did 4 the way they did it. They felt like this movie was so dark and so miserable that they needed like a breath of fresh air. It needed to be something a little lighter. But there are little moments of fun and humor in this, just to keep it from getting too heavy. And Rob asked a little earlier, and I kind of breezed over it, but I am curious what you think of this. I asked this in a poll question earlier in the week too. Which Saavik do you prefer? Which actress who plays Saavik, though? Kirstie Alley in Star Trek 2 or Robin Curtis in this movie? Like, there's a lot of strong opinion.
I don't have a strong opinion. I think both are.
I'm the same way.
Fine. It's funny how people kind of get and how people get in when they change actresses and actors. I know I have convictions like that, but for this, I doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't have a real strong opinion. I think they're both good. I think they both. If I had to pick, I think maybe Kirstie Alley in 2, just because I think the character's a little sharper in 2. But she's got a lot to do here too. Like, Saavik's very involved in this story, and I think the scene, a sequence that really, I think back years ago when I was younger, I used to watch the movie screech to a halt when they found young Spock, and like he's going through Ponfar, and Saavik's trying to help him through it. Like, I used to feel like, man, this movie is dying right now. Like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, even when I was a kid. But as I get older, I think that stuff's great. I think Saavik's really good in that scene, and I think it's like especially at that point in the movie when there's a lot happening with the Enterprise being stolen and the Klingons are doing bad stuff. It's like I think it's kind of a necessary, like, pump the brakes, take a minute, and I also catch your breath a little bit. Yeah. And it's cool. It's like playing into Trek canon, and it's addressing the Ponfar thing. Like, it's smart enough to know, like, its own history and to answer questions that people are going to ask. Like, it addresses things like that. So, how did you feel with that? Like, did you feel like the movie slowed down really a lot at that point? Were you okay with the scene?
I liked it because just the way it was kind of intertwined with the sailing of the Enterprise and stuff like that. I think it was good. It was really balanced, and that's I think kind of a testament to the direction a little bit. Also, the editing was great.
Yes.
So, and that's kind of one of my questions that I had written down was, what did you think of Nimoy's direction in this film?
I think you did a really good job. I think you just nailed it right there with that scene. I think that's a scene that really could have played uncomfortably, because it's tricky. Like, it's going to some uncomfortable territory. But I think he handles it a lot of sensitivity and a lot of honesty, and it's not sexualized. Like, it's not over the top in any way. It's really comfortably done, and I think it's as tastefully done as possible, and that's all on him. That's Nimoy. He gets credit for that. I think there's a lot of really memorable imagery in this. Like you were talking about earlier, I think the way he shot the mind meld scene was innovative and different.
So great.
Yeah, I mean, those kinds of scenes, like, you see them in TV a lot when they do them, when in Enterprise or in Voyager with Tuvok or in TOS. It's got to be a tricky thing to shoot, like 2 actors, like an actor holding one guy's face or somebody's face, and like how do you convey that? Like, how do you convey that this is like a bizarre thing, like something mystical and strange is happening? And a lot of times in TV, they'll like flash to like images and like weird, like, they'll cut to like flashback type stuff. Yep. They do things like that to like convey it. And I love what Nimoy did. Nimoy did it like the most simple way that you could, and The use of like the way it's written with them saying the lines of dialogue to each other, like Sarek saying Spock's lines and Kirk saying his lines, and like the close-ups of the mouth and the eyes. It does it all. It does everything it needs to do to be a mind meld scene and tell you that this is unusual and different and alien, without going over the top and being needlessly flashy. And again, that's Nimoy. But and then just from a strictly like visual standpoint, images like I pointed out on Twitter earlier in the week when I was watching the movie, the shot of the Enterprise coming down in the atmosphere of the Genesis planet with the crew standing there is like easily one of my like 2 or 3. Yes, it's such a great image. And there's a lot of that, shots of the Enterprise going into space dock. That's visual effects, maybe more than him. But I think the movie has a real visual flair that it doesn't. I don't watch the movie and think, man, this looks like a first time director, which it was. Nimoy had never directed a movie before. It's got enough visual style to it and enough individual elements that make it its own movie, to not make you think this is the first time or just trying to play it safe. I mean, what do you think? Do you think he?
I thought he did a great job because he kind of stepped out of the Star Trek mold of the talking heads, and he kind of introduced some movement, and some close-ups, and just some great shots and great editing too. So I think he crushed it first time.
And he had a hand in a lot of the design. He approved things like as the director of this movie, he approved the look of the Klingon bird of prey and like the set design of the Klingon bird of prey and the Excelsior, like all those models and stuff. Nimoy had approval on that stuff, so he did a lot. Like there's a lot even beyond just like the day-to-day grind of directing the movie and things like the camera movement. Like I think about that scene where, like I was talking about earlier, when Kirk goes into Spock's quarters and McCoy's there, like the way that camera moves around, keeps that scene alive, is really pretty good and really not first timery. With directors that maybe might not be as I don't know, confident or willing to do different kinds of things. And like you said, Star Trek especially later on, Star Trek has such like a visual language that's like baked in, and I think talking heads, like you said, very simplistic. Point the camera and just let the actors do their thing. And this movie is refreshingly diverse in the way it looks, and they take visual chances and things. So I think a big, huge scene that we kind of just alluded to that I think we have to talk about is the way the Enterprise is destroyed. And even beyond that, like that whole sequence where they get to the Genesis planet, they have their quick little battle. They can't really fight because the ship's not equipped, and they don't have enough crew to like fight a real battle. It's all kind of faked, just enough to hopefully win the day. And then David gets killed, and they swat. The ship gets blown up. Like that whole sequence, like the death of David, the Enterprise blowing up. Like, does that stuff? Like, how does that section of the movie work for you? Like, is that peak Star Trek 3? Is it hit and miss? Like, what do you think of that portion of the movie?
I think it's all right. It works for me. I think that it could be, to me, it was a little clunky, but I mean, it was something to expect. But I think a lot was happening in that scene.
Yes.
I think a lot happens at the end of the movie, because you get this, again, I talk about balance, but you get this really fast-paced battle scene and stuff blown up, and then you get to Mount Seleia where it's kind
very
of slow down.
Methodical.
Yeah. So I think it worked for me. What do you think?
I think it works. The David thing, I think it works because of Shatner's performance, because we don't really know David that well.
We didn't.
He's I think he works better in Star Trek 2, in that Star Trek 2 is so much about like where Kirk is in his life and the choices he's made and the kind of life he's led and choices he's made as far as Dr. Marcus and David, like that plays thematically in Star Trek 2 really well. That there is this whole other side of Kirk that you don't really know about because of the choices he's made, to dedicate himself to his career and be the captain of the Enterprise. where in Star Trek 3, the decision to kill him, it's fine. It does raise the stakes, and there is a dramatic element to, man, I just found out he knew he had the son, he knew he existed, but I'm finally reconnecting with him, and now he's taken away. Like there is some dramatic punch to that for sure. But it doesn't have I don't think it has a dramatic impact at all that like the Enterprise does, like losing the Enterprise and making the decision to sacrifice the ship. Yeah, that's definitely the bigger moment.
Yeah.
But I think the death of David works because Shatner's performance in the fallout of that is really pretty good. I think when I think of that, I think of Kirk facing the other way in the chair and McCoy like putting his hand on him, like whispering to him for a minute to like, I guess, probably snap out of it. We got to do this. We'll deal with this later. I think that part of the scene works. I don't have a lot of feelings for David because we don't really know him that well. And, I don't know that he's that great of a character. But I do love the destruction of the Enterprise sequence. I think that works. For me. I love that they even go back, and I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you would remember this. But in the episode of TOS, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, the one with the two-faced, black-white aliens, they threaten to blow up the ship in that episode. And they go through the whole self-destruct sequence. And the dialogue in Star Trek 3 is like exactly lifted from that. Like the self-destruct sequence is the same. The codes, everything about it is exactly. And I love that. I love like the respect for, the fact that, they did this before and they went back and they took the language and how they did it. That's what makes Star Trek to me, like that element of continuity and that there's some sense to be made about all this stuff. Like just, I just think I because what the Enterprise means to Kirk, and that's a clear big decision that he had to make. And McCoy's line when they're on the planet and they see the ship going down, and Kirk's like, my God bones, what have I done? And McCoy says, you did what you had to do, what you always do. You turned death into a fighting chance to live. Like that, all that stuff is great, and it's exactly like what Kirk is and what Star Trek is, and like it feels like really to the core of what the original series is about.
And that line comes kind of full circle when he talks to Sarek. And Sarek thanks him. He's like, I did what I had to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. And you also kind of like all this stuff that happens in the movie, all the sacrifice and things that Kirk kind of gives up, his career, he loses his son, he loses his ship. And you kind of said it, Kirk's journey, like Kirk's arc in this movie is kind of the mirror of Spock's arc in 2. Star Trek 2 with Spock is all about the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. And Star Trek 3 is all about sometimes the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. Like sometimes you do have to. It's all about the fact that it's not.
Great point.
It's not always just one. Like it's situational, and it's individual. It's great, and it's right in line with what Star Trek's all about. Star Trek, the original series, is so much about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy kind of weighing these different ways of thinking and ways of approaching problems, and different schools of thought and on how to handle these things. And Spock is so definitively for this way, logic and needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And McCoy typically is the complete opposite, and Kirk has to sort it out. And Star Trek 3 is putting those debates, Star Trek 2 and 3 are putting those debates in their biggest, most, impactful to the characters tests. They're literally doing it for each other. So I think these movies are pretty like essential TOS Star Trek. 2 is obvious. Everybody always says that about 2. That's not a earth-shattering comment. Star Trek 2 is definitive Star Trek. Like it is Star Trek, the original series in a nutshell. Yeah, of course it is. But I think 3 is too. I think 2 is better because of what 3 talks about too. You know what I mean? Like, and I think some people have issues with that. I think some people still think that, like the emotional impact of losing Spock in 2 is blunted by what they did in 3 and beyond. And I get that. I do too. Like there's definitely an element of that. And I agree with that. But I do, for all the reasons I just talked about, think that, 3 in some ways also helps too that you get both sides of that.
Yeah. Both sides of the coin for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Trying to think, am I out of questions? If I had to ask you real quick, what's the single best moment, scene, best thing in this movie? Like best little thing. Like if you had to pick one little thing, not an MVP. I'm going to ask you that in a second, but just a scene, anything.
I would. Leather jacket is definitely up there. I keep coming back to the leather jacket. I think at the end, maybe that's just what's coming to me right now.
Yeah.
Jim, your name is Jim.
Yes, that's so
yeah.
Good.
It's like that moment to me. It's like all Kirk realizes all the stuff that he just did was worth it.
Yep, that is the ending. I think the ending's great.
Yeah.
There's a majesty and like a larger than lifeness aspect of going to Vulcan. Like Vulcan feels big and like alien and weird and cool in a way that it couldn't be. Like the only time up until that point you've ever seen Vulcan was in Amok Time, which is really done as like a typical TOS planet. And there's a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool art direction in that courtyard, and they definitely do a good job in the show for what they had. But Star Trek 3 is doing it on a whole. I guess we saw it in 1 too, in the motion picture at the very beginning. So not right there, but and that's certainly big too. There's a lot of big stuff in that little scene, but this is on a whole nother level. The Vulcan priestess is really kind of cool and alien and demanding and like undeniably in control of that whole situation. There's some great music in it. I think just like the shots of the bird of prey like landing and the music swelling is like really big Star Trek stuff. But yeah, you're right.
For you, what is that the little moment?
For me, I think it's the scene I think it's the scene with the crew watching the Enterprise go down and McCoy, that exchange between McCoy and Kirk. You know, you did what you always do. Turn death into a fighting chance to live. I think that's.
What's that line? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you first.
That line to me was like, is that McCoy or is that Spock?
That's a good. I never thought of that. You're so right. You don't know a lot of stuff in this movie that McCoy says. You don't know really where it's coming from. But that is a great point that I never thought of. Maybe it's coming from both of them. You know, like it's. I don't know because they both. Sure as hell no. Kirk, like they've both seen Kirk do these things, and this is an extreme example. Kirk's never had to go this far, but I think if anybody wouldn't doubt that Kirk would do it in a pinch, it's those two people. So maybe it's like the one time, because a lot of this movie McCoy isn't all there. You know, a lot of the things McCoy's saying are not really all there. Like he's kind of coming in and out of like lucidity. He's kind of crazy sometimes. And that completely sane. Like it's all lining up, and maybe it's all lining up because. Those both you know brains are working together and on the same page. So that's a great point that I never thought of. Yeah, I'm going to use that for the rest of my life when I talk about Star Trek 3. So really good stuff there. But yeah, I think that's my moment from the movie that I would say is like the best minute of Star Trek 3. I think the emotional impact of it, the visual look of it, the dialogue, the performances, it all comes together in like this perfect little package. Who's the MVP of the movie? Who's the single Kirk? Shatner is Kirk.
Easy one. Shatner is Kirk.
Shatner. Totally agree. That's my call too. Movie completely rides on him. It succeeds or fails because of his performance, and it works because of everything he did. So, yep, totally agree.
Chat, let us know your MVP. Rob, once you finish. And Ross, looks like you're going to be watching that tonight, so if you're still in here, definitely let us know your MVP. Rob, the transwarp and the Excelsior, Bill touched on that. Different warp scale than we are used to. Yeah, that's his theory. It's different warp scale.
Yeah, that's the only thing I've seen other theories as well, but that's the one I kind of go with. some people say, you know, maybe Scotty's sabotage job was so good that it damaged, you know, it just completely destroyed the idea of Federation transwarp technology. Like Scotty didn't just destroy it on the Excelsior; he destroyed it forever. So it's all Scotty's fault that like Voyager couldn't get home faster.
I mean that could be because if we think about it, the Excelsior is an experiment. So maybe the experiment, just like maybe the Spore Drive, Discovery is an experiment also, and it doesn't work. So.
And they gave up when it didn't work. They didn't. They gave up and said it's not worth the resources. It's too dangerous. Yeah. And that's the other thing. Like, it was experimental. Maybe it wouldn't have worked without Scotty sabotage. Scotty sabotaged the ship completely, and you know, ruined a lot of stuff. And you know, maybe it wouldn't have worked anyway. You know, there's all kinds of theories.
Yeah, because it could have been like health issues because they had to like strap themselves into their suits and like get ready.
Yep. Yeah, that's I love that scene too. That's another one it's a bigger moment. Like I was trying to focus in on when we were talking about favorite moment on something small, but that sequence where they're stealing the Enterprise is some of my favorite Star Trek stuff ever. Yeah, you know, it's so simple. Like these just little shots of the ship moving through space dock with that's a scene that completely works because of the score. Yes. James Horner's music is bombastic and huge. Like there's this moment where the Enterprise, you get the view of the Enterprise like pulling out, like backing out of space dock. And the music, that's another element of like, there's like an element of FU in the music even. Like Kirk is out, man. He's gone. You can't stop him. That's definitely one of my favorite sequences in all of Star Trek. If I had to give like 3 scenes from any of it, that scene would be in it. In that list of just things I could put on and just kind of watch over and over again of you know, Star Trek stuff.
Because that scene I feel like without kind of music, it could be like
it's a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah, nothing boring. Like it could be like 2001 Space Odyssey, where it's like kind of long shots of these ships that are kind of a little bit, but it's like no matter what, if this door is gonna open, I'm going.
Yep. Yeah, it's some of the best music in all of Trek. And that's another question I kind of asked on Twitter. Maybe I can pull them up real quick before we finish up, and I'll just go over those results real quick. But I did ask, like, where does the Star Trek 3 score kind of sit in the lineage of Star Trek film scores? And
I think it's underrated.
I think it's underrated too.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. Yeah. There's a lot of good. I love the Klingon music in it, like the big French horns that are like pounding and big percussion stuff. Like there's great music in Star Trek 3. So the first question I asked is, Commander Kirk, played by Christopher Lloyd, is a better than average Star Trek antagonist? And 41 votes, 78% said true, 22% said false. So people like Kirk as a Star Trek bad guy. I said the stealing of the Enterprise sequence is the high point of Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock. 84% said true, 16% said false. So people dig that. James Horner's score for Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock is in the upper half of Star Trek film scores. 88% said true. 14% said false. Yes. Yeah. Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock features William Shatner's best performance as Kirk. 46 votes, 50% said true, 50% said false. So,
man, that's close. Dang.
Yeah, no definitive answer there. And then Lieutenant Savick is better Christy Alley in Star Trek 2 or Robin Curtis in Star Trek 3. 74% said Christy Alley in 2. 26% said Robin Curtis in 3.
That's no surprise.
Yeah. So some interesting answers there. I think the most telling is the Shatner performance thing, because that's an impossible question to answer. And that 50-50 tells you, you know, the masses are saying, I don't effing know. Like, it's just too much. It's too much to ask to try to figure that out. There's too many. So yeah, really interesting conversation. I love this in the grand scheme of things. And my last question to you is, and I don't know that you have like a definitive ranking of the 13 Star Trek movies. I'm thinking, not recently have you sat down and tried to do that, but in a pinch, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm not going to ask for like a specific placement. I'm not saying put it 7th or 9th or 5th or whatever like that, but roundabout, like let's do this. Which Star Trek movies are you comfortable saying are better than Star Trek 3?
Two.
Which ones would you say right now?
Yeah, two.
Two. Mm-hmm.
6.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's tough because I'm always with I kind of learned this from you. It's when people ask you, what's your favorite series? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, it's the one I'm watching. Or what? How do you rank your? What's your favorite movie? Well, it's just the one I just watched. It's tough.
Yep.
It's middle to upper pack, I guess, because
Yeah.
above it is great too. It's hard. All
Yeah.
the movies are tough to rank. So
Yeah.
yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
Is it better? Is it better than the motion picture?
I don't know. Yes, I think it is.
I think it is too.
I think it
I
is.
think it is.
Yeah.
I would say it's. I would say 2 is better. 4 is better. 6 is better. First Contact is better. I would say Beyond is better. And I think I might say 09 is better. But I think it's better.
Yeah, I would say that too. I would say that too. I guess I forgot about Kelvin Timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that would put it about 6th or 7th. I want to say, depending on the question. I think that I really struggled with the last time I did like the full ranking was I had 3 and 09 in like a really tight, like within like 4 or 5 spots of each other.
That's a tough call. Okay.
And I'm not sure. I think I came out on top. I think I had 09 a lot higher. So I think I want to say I would have the movie 7th, but I'm not definitively saying that because I'm in the process of putting together a new set of rankings, and we'll see when I get to it in the sequence of watching everything. Yeah. So we'll see, but again, that puts it like right in the middle of the pack for me, and I think that's kind of where it belongs. But if you're like scaling it and saying, not just in the middle of the pack, but like where you would like put gaps between the movies, it would be in like the upper. There would be a gap between some of these movies and some of the others for me, and it would be in the more towards the top than towards the bottom of that listing if you were going to do it that way. So I think it's really good. I think it's essential Star Trek. I can tell you this, I have my closest friend in real life is like in my daily, real life, is not a Star Trek fan by any means. And I've shown him little bits here and there, and I can remember showing him 2 and 3 like in one night. We watched both. And then we watched 4. He does like Star Trek 4 a lot. Like Star Trek 4 is like the one piece of Star Trek that I can kind of put on like in the background, and he won't like look at me cross-eyed, be like, come on. Like he will watch Star Trek 4 no problem. Yeah. But he did actually in the moment really enjoy it. Okay. And I think it's because there's so much stuff in it. I think my memory of it, this is a few years ago, is he liked a lot of the visual stuff in it, the ships, the space dock. Like there's just a lot happening in it. And it's a movie that does have like a really, once it gets going, especially like a really propulsive, like quick moving, full speed ahead kind of pacing. So that always intrigues me that I had that experience of showing, like he preferred 3 to 2, but as a non-fan and not really invested in it and doesn't really know the characters that well. And 3 worked for him really well. So just a little side note thought.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was Star Trek 3.
Star Trek 3.
I feel like I have a lot of podcasts I could highlight, but I've kind of whittled it down to 3.
Okay.
So, first I'll start with, if that's okay to transition to.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now's the time. I'd like to highlight primitive culture, and Rob, if you're still listening, you got to listen to the one about kind of politics, and they talk about the Articles of the Federation, which is a book, and it was really cool because the author of the book has so much Star Trek knowledge that blows my mind, and it's cool to see that in an author, I guess. Also, Trek Ranks, obviously, we got to give a shout out to Trek Ranks. Crushing it lately with awesome topics. And then My last one that I'll highlight is we've talked about this before on the podcast, but it's Cinemaholics, and
No, cool.
there's like they kind of branched out and brought in another team because they have kind of their main show where they review films, but then they've got anyway, that's all they got where they kind of rank different types of films. And I was like, for the longest time, for last month, I was like, why aren't they posting anything? But now they have their kind of own sub
Yeah.
folder of it. So I found that, and so now I have 4 or 5 to catch up on, which is good because I got a lot of travel coming on. So, but yeah, anyway, that's all I got on Cinemaholics. Great rapport with each other, really funny, and talking about film. So if you're interested in that, check that out.
Yeah, I can co-sign on that. That's a great podcast. I listened to it. Dan introduced me to it. If you're a movie fan, it's a great listen. Yeah, so for me, I'm a little backed up on some things from being on vacation. I didn't have quite as much listening time as I was hoping for.
Yeah.
But I did listen to a Mission Log live episode. They had Vic Mignogna from Star Trek Continues on, and definitely a big fan of that show. I love Star Trek Continues. I love Vic Mignogna. He's always fun to listen to. He's really knowledgeable, really passionate, just really likable guy. Totally enjoyed that. I love those guys at Mission Log. I think that's a top of the line podcast. I did listen to. I signed up for. I'm not a Portal 47 subscriber yet. For Larry Nemechek's thing yet. I'm working my way up to it. I'm one of those people that goes to the website and looks at it and gets really close, and then I get scared off and leave. And it's just a matter of time before I pull the trigger. But he did have a free like open house session with Michael Westmore, and I got to listen to that, the recording of that. I wasn't there live, but if you signed up for the free session, you got a recording of it, and that was really good. So if you ever get an opportunity when he has those open houses, I can't recommend them enough. Check them out. A lot of great knowledge, a lot of great information that is not typically stuff that we get access to as fans.
Yeah.
So really enjoyed that. Trek Profiles, Rob is asking about, is a fantastic podcast.
Yes, I think I've listened to the first 2, I think. Yeah. Be backed up a little bit.
I think I'm up to date. I listened to the one with, I think it was Bill from Trek Geeks.
Right.
And I want to say that's like the 5th one or 4th one.
Yeah.
Really love it. It's a unique idea. I can't believe nobody else thought of it yet until those guys went off and did it. Interviewing fans about what makes their fandom unique and what got them into it. Totally love it. I think it's a great podcast. One of the best ones out there right now. And I look forward to it every week. Can't recommend it highly enough. I think the Tricorder Transmission has been really killing it lately. I think between Trek Ranks and Trek Profiles and their news podcast that they do, their discussions on Discovery, they're really doing a good job with a lot of good content. And my non-Star Trek podcast that I'll throw out there that I just discovered last night, and Dan knows this about me, like this is a completely me podcast. It's called The Oscars Should Have Gone To, and they go to random.
That's so up your alley.
It's so up my alley. They pick a random year and they watch over the course of like a week all the Best Picture nominations from a given year, and they just talk about the year and if they made the right call at the Academy, and if there are other movies that maybe should have been in the conversation that weren't. That's exactly like I do that in my free time. I decide like on a whim, you know what, I'm going to watch over the course of this weekend. I'm going to watch the Best Picture nominees from 1984. Like I've done that before, so this is exactly like my kind of show. And I just discovered it and I'm loving it. It's not maybe up the alley of everyone who's watching this show, but a little taste of my own taste and personality, and just threw it out there. So
yes,
cool. So. Yeah, the Haley Stoddard episode, Rob, of Trek Profiles was very good. They're all good. I can't sit here and name off everybody they've interviewed, but it's been a quite a run where they've been all really, really good. I enjoy it every single time. So.
Yep. All right, guys, that's been Bill and I kind of talking about the lost treasure that is Star Trek 3. You guys know the drill. The discussion does not have to stop here. Come over to Twitter, Facebook. I put a link down in the description that is to join Discord, and then kind of how to get into kind of our Discord specific channel is over on Bill's Twitter.
Yes.
Yes. So scheduling next couple weeks is gonna be a little funky because I got the big day next weekend. It's crazy to say out loud, but
Big day.
yes. And then I'll be off to Riza for the next week. So keep up to date with our Twitters on the scheduling and the next episode. I'm going to be continuing to watch Star Trek. So is Bill. He's going to have all his stuff.
Yep.
So,
I think what we're going to do, I know at least next week, we're probably unlikely to have a live episode
yes.
in the next week,
Yep.
given things happening in somebody's life.
Yeah.
Big day. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to be pushing out some of the old episodes that I think maybe people who maybe haven't discovered us yet or just getting around to seeing our stuff might want to check out. Or you never know, maybe Rob, somebody like you who's been around since the beginning, go back into the archives and listen to something old again. So I'm gonna be pushing out some stuff. I'm gonna be trying to start some conversations about conversations we've already had on Trek Live. I'm trying to keep the conversation going for the next week. So stay tuned for that. In addition to all the typical episode reviews and polls, fun stuff like that. That'll be in the works for the next week.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, guys. This has been episode 52, I think, of Trek Live.
Clip show.
Yep. And we'll thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Have a good one, everybody.